Hello, everyone. Welcome to Sunday's live stream. I am super excited. We got tons of stuff to talk about. Boy, every single day, it just seems like it gets crazier and crazier and crazier. I was on Twitter the other day, and I just had to post that GIF of Will Ferrell when he was in Zoolander. And he says, it feels like I'm taking crazy pills. That's exactly the way I feel every single morning. I wake up and look at my app that I have on my phone about the stock market or people buying bankrupt companies. Who knows what it's going to be next week? But I'm really stoked that all of you are here on the live stream. We've got Kevin saying, step number 2. Oh, Kane. What's up, Kane? Kevin, Grim, Isaac, Opportunistic Business Models, LLC. Cool. Buck, MM. I think there's a bit of a lag on this chat. I say that every single stream. But anyway, let's get into the super chats, guys. Sebastian, we probably want to stop him at 11:15 at the latest, or excuse me, well, 11:15 our time, in 15 minutes or so, just because I've really got a ton of stuff to do. Before we get into the live stream, guys, an update on Rebel Capitalist Pro. We were supposed to go live this weekend. Unfortunately, on Friday, we had some technical issues that we need to sort out. So I just didn't want to go live and have it half-ass. So it's going to go live next weekend. So just stay tuned for that. If you guys have any questions or want to be emailed, you can email our digital marketing person, Gene, and the email address we're using for that is just george@georgegammon.com. And we'll give you instructions to go and put yourself on a list to be notified as soon as it is live. We are just having some issues with the forum itself. Just as a reminder, the product, Rebel Capitalist Pro, is going to be research from Chris McIntosh and Lynn Alden. Additionally, it'll be live stream Q&As just like this, but with myself and Lynn or Chris, where we're going over their last research paper, excuse me, and they're explaining to you, or they're explaining to members exactly, what their thought process is when they were writing that research or selecting the specific chart. I know one of the charts we used for the example with Chris was a chart of the NASDAQ in terms of gold. And I found that very interesting, but he walks through just kind of what he sees and what the takeaways are and what the actionable takeaways are. Obviously, that's most important. And then at the end of the live streams, we do a Q&A with the members where you can ask your questions directly to Lynn, Chris, or myself. You got a question for me. But then the meat of it is really this online forum for members where I'll be in there answering questions, asking some questions as well. And that's where kind of the research lives, and we can discuss and go back and forth with ideas. And I think the value is really going to be in the combined brain power of the online forum. And it was funny. I was doing kind of like a sales video just to pitch it really quick. And I was thinking to myself, okay, what are some of the benefits of this members forum that we have for Rebel Capitalist Pro? And one of the things that came to mind is I said it was an actual sane space. So not a safe space like you have in colleges, but it was someplace online outside of Facebook or something like that, where people are actually sane. And so that's one of the main features of Rebel Capitalist Pro is the forum is a sane space where you can just get away from all the people on your Facebook feed, your friends and family member Freds that are absolutely nuts. So anyway, just we'll go live with that next weekend, guys. So look forward to that. And I look forward to being in the forums and chatting with all the members. It's going to be a lot of fun. We're going to learn a lot. And I think long term, it's going to benefit people tremendously. So Sebastian, let's go right into the super chats, buddy. Okay, RM, thank you for the super chat. Hi, George. We enjoy the videos you post. Very cool. I'm glad you're enjoying those. Thanks a lot. Which specific dividend-paying stocks for each sector are you watching to buy? What's your recommendation on investing in farms for beginners? Boy, I'm not a farmer myself, so I don't know. That gets a little complicated. If I was going to start a farm, I'd do it outside the United States. Because think about it, you've got a great arbitrage play in the sense that you can get the land, and better land, quite frankly. I mean, I'm here in Medellin, Colombia, and we all know well that stuff grows. Well, I won't go there, but everything grows really, really well in Colombia. But even when you're driving from Medellin, where I am in the valley, up to the airport in Rio Negro, which is maybe a 20 or 30-minute drive up the hill, I mean, you see like 5 different ecosystems. So I don't want to go into it, but the bottom line is there's a lot of very fertile land where you could buy hectares here or acres at a much cheaper rate. The labor's a lot cheaper. You could do organic. You could do whatever the people are buying at Whole Foods and Trader Joe's nowadays. But you could do all that here. And you think about the commodity that you're producing, it's the exact same price. Like a blueberry is a blueberry. If it's grown in Chile or grown in Colombia, unless I'm wrong, I would assume that a blueberry that you get at Trader Joe's in Miami is going to be the same price if it's organic, regardless of whether it's coming from Mexico, Colombia, or Oregon or California. So I think that's a neat little arbitrage play. That's about the extent of my knowledge with farming, though. I do know that, I'm friends with people in the Midwest who know a lot about farming, and they've purchased land and they've leased it to farmers, and they actually make a decent amount doing that. I also had a lot of buddies in Kansas City specifically that have purchased land and they lease it to deer hunters. And that's something that like who's talking about that? And they actually do really well. They have a great return because these deer hunters, you think deer hunting, you just go out and just find one and shoot it or whatever. It doesn't work that way. Like you track it for like 2 years sometimes. I mean, it really is nuts. These guys who are really into it, but they make a decent return there. So anyway, let me focus more so on your question. So as far as my recommendation on investing in farms for beginners, I don't know if I have any recommendations there. Although I like the agriculture space, it's an industry, if you will. It's kind of on my watch list. As far as specific dividend paying stocks for each sector that are on my watch list, well, oil for sure. So Shell, Exxon, Chevron, those are on my watch list. The banks, the U.S. banks are on my watch list. I actually started thinking about that. I bought some Wells Fargo, not in March. On Twitter, I talk about what I bought in March often, which are commodity stocks. And I can't remember when I bought Wells Fargo, but it wasn't in March. But I bought it at almost a low. I've gotten lucky with that here recently. But I bought it because, number one, it's paying a great dividend. It's super cheap. The PE is like 7 or 8. And I realize there's a lot of headwind. I get it. I understand the bear argument well. But I'm not buying it for 2 months. I'm buying it for 10 years. I don't think Wells Fargo is going to go bust. Maybe they will. But that's why I don't go and buy 100% of it. That's why I don't go all in. And I only buy it with maybe 2% of my portfolio, right? But also I started thinking about their balance sheet, and I had a conversation with Lynn Alden the other day, and obviously you guys know how smart she is, and she kind of backed that up with looking at the excess reserves for the banks held that they have at the Fed, and it's over 1.5 1.7 trillion now, which is an all-time high. So their balance sheets are decent. Now, I'm not saying they're going to do well in the next year or two, but I'm not sure they'd go bust. And that's for the American banks, and the big ones, the local retail banks. I think they could have some big problems there. But there, again, you put it on your watch list. I'm not saying go out and buy it. And let's see what else. The commodity space. So the coal miners pay a great dividend. I bought that in March. Let's see, I'm thinking through here. What else? Oh, the casino stocks. Yeah, so I haven't bought any casino stocks, but they're on my watch list. So if we get another big downturn, we test the lows or go even further down, and I could get like a Las Vegas Sands at a super cheap multiple, like under 10, I would think about that. So that's on my watch list. I really like the casino stocks because it's hard for people to understand that haven't been to Asia, but the Asian culture, especially the Chinese, I mean, they are all about gambling. I mean, that's all they do. I mean, I hate the stereotype like that, but if you've been to Hong Kong or been to China, that's they just gamble. Like that's what they're all about. So I could tell you, I don't know what's happening to the Sands, the stock, but what I can tell you is that the Chinese will be gambling for a long, long, long time. Just a matter of where they're gambling. So I think that's where I'd start. I'd start with the oil producers. I'd start with the casinos. And again, I'm not saying buy them right now. I am not saying that. I'm saying that's just kind of what's on my watch list. And some of the American banks might be on my watch list. And then if you can, they're kind of expensive now. I was going to say the gold companies that have the dividend. I would put them on my list too. I doubt they'll get cheap. Yeah, they're probably not going to get cheap, but I look at more of the gold stocks as a speculative play, not really I don't really look at it as a dividend play. Okay, so it looks like, oh gosh, I got to get going here, guys. Sorry about that. So Sebastian put up the little banner, no more super chats. I had a guy in the comments say, stop that stupid ticker thing. It's driving me crazy. So I didn't think about it until he mentioned it. So we don't have the ticker anymore. We've just got a little sign. Looks like right above my head. I gotta kind of lean down like this. So it's not the screen, but yeah, so no more super chats, guys. I looks like we've got a bunch, and so I need to get going. So RM, that would be my best advice. I'm sure there's other stuff that I'm forgetting, so make sure that you're watching the videos, and I'll go over that and as it comes up for sure. Okay, next question. Rowan, thank you for the super chat. Hello, George. The U.S. has the most retail space per capita of any country. Yeah, right. And lowest sales per square feet. Yeah, doesn't it have to revert to the mean sooner than later? Meaning go down. I don't like commercial real estate. I don't like it for several reasons. I don't like it because I don't think it's a good investment. It might be cheap, but just because something's cheap doesn't mean you buy it. It's a nice prerequisite, but it's not. It doesn't mean that that's the only thing you look at. Another reason I don't really like commercial real estate is it's very hard to get renters in there to lease the space just based on things that are within your control. If you've got a residential property, you can just drop the rent by $50, and you're going to have people lined up waiting to rent that thing. Or you can go in there and remodel the kitchen. You can remodel a bathroom, the master bath, change the carpets, paint, put it, do the landscaping. There's a lot of things that you can do to get a renter in there really quick. But I owned a commercial building when I first got into real estate, and I didn't like it at all because it was a great location, fantastic, right down by the plaza in Kansas City, if any of you are familiar with that area. But I had a tenant move out, and I couldn't get one back in. And I kept asking my agent, what can I do? What can I do? And they're like, you really can't do anything because they're going to come in and want to white box it anyway. So just demo everything. They're going to want TIs, tenant improvements. So it's just a waiting game. I don't really like that. I'd rather have a little bit higher occupancy with on and off, just doing 1-year leases with residential tenants. And then also, you don't have a second buyer. With commercial, your only buyer is an investor. Where with residential, you've got your buyers are investors and their owner occupants. So you've got a lot more liquidity with residential. But I'm not really sure your question, Rowan, but I don't like commercial real estate in the United States at all. So even though it might be cheap. Okay, next question. Super Traveler. All right. Gigi, what did you do before 2012 and real estate? Well, as an entrepreneur, I got out of college in 98, I think, 98, 99, something like that. And I started a t-shirt business. It was a kind of a clothing business, but I knew that the way to do it was by selling t-shirts. So I had this t-shirt business, and of course that didn't go anywhere. And it was a lot of fun. I learned a lot though. Then I had a kind of a normal job, if you want to call it that. And I kind of, from there, I just branched off and started a kind of a consulting company in the media buying space with radio and TV. And then I took a couple businesses over from bankruptcy for another individual who went in, took them over, and then hired me to go in and just kind of clean house and get them profitable and sell them again. And then I've started many of my own businesses. Some have done well, others have not. I always tell people, fortunately, I had a few more winners than I did losers, but I've never been afraid of risk, calculated risk. Other people would look at what I've done and say that it was insanely risky, but I never saw it that way because for me, I felt as though there was a lot less downside and a lot more upside than other people saw at the time. And fortunately, I was right more than I was wrong. And so then in 2012, I retired because the business I had at the time that I started in 2009 or 2008 had over 100 employees. We had over 24 million in annual revenues. Revenues, not profit, revenues. Our margin, we were at a 10% profit margin. So you can kind of do the math there, but we were 24 million revenues, over 100 employees. And I was on a flight to Australia. I remember it well, from LA to Australia, about a 14-hour flight, if my memory serves me well. And it just, I had enough. And I realized that I built this monster and I had become a slave to the monster that I had created. I had very little freedom, and that's not what I was all about. And I said, well, why are you doing this, George? Why are you making money? The whole point to make money is to have more freedom. So if you're making money, but you have less freedom than you did in college when you didn't have two nickels to rub together, what's the point? So that's when I decided to take some time off, and that just led to me just completely hanging it up and retiring. And that's when I go into the story of finding out about, in fact, I was at Marina Bay Sands in Singapore at the casino, the hotel casino, and I had about 15 minutes to blow before dinner, and I stumbled across the Free to Choose series from Milton Friedman on YouTube. And I just went right down the rabbit hole. I mean, I was completely enthralled. And from there, I went on to Thomas Sowell. And then I started studying kind of investors that were more Austrian minded, like Jim Rogers and Mark Faber and Peter Schiff and Doug Casey and Jim Grant. And it was just, it was game over from there. That was my new love. That was my new passion. And ever since then, I've just completely been obsessive compulsive about macro and investing. Okay, next question. Emmanuel, thank you for the super chat. Why is real estate considered long volatility? You often talk about short against the dollar, okay, as it relates to 30-year fixed mortgages. What do you mean? Okay, this is a great question. So, Emmanuel, it really depends on where the real estate is. So for Hugh Hendry and Raoul Paul, they have real estate in the Caribbean, in these very small islands. So Raoul has real estate in Little Cayman, I believe, and Hugh has it in real estate in St. Bart's. So why is this long volatility? Because for especially with Hugh, he has this resort that caters to people who have substantial disposable income. Most of them have these big super yachts and stuff like that. So if you've got a guy that's worth $50-100 million and they're, let's say, in the United States, and they see everything, the social unrest, the riots, the looting, and let's just say it gets worse, which I think eventually it will. They're going to be like, listen, I'm out. Like, I'm not hanging around to watch how this story ends. So I'm going to hop on my 80-foot yacht and just from Miami, and I'm just going to watch it from a distance. Like, I know that sooner or later this will end. Is that 6 weeks? Is that 6 months? I don't know. But regardless, I'm not going to stick around to be right in the thick of things. So I'm going to hop on my yacht and I'm going to go down to St. Bart's, because I know that there's not going to be any Antifa riots in St. Bart's, or there's just a beach and I'm going to be able to chill, and whatever happens, happens. Another thing, if we really see escalation between the United States and China, volatility. If you got 100 million, you're going to want to stick around in the United States and be right in the middle of a potential nuclear war or whatever. No way. Absolutely not. So if you've got some disposable income, if you got resources, you're out. I mean, you're hitting the bid on everything you got in the United States, and you're going down to St. Bart's. You're going down to somewhere where you're out of the line of fire, let's say. And that's why those types of properties could be considered long volatility. Okay. As far as shorting the dollar, if you've got a fixed rate 30-year mortgage, and let's just say the interest rate is 3%, you've got that locked in. So, Emmanuel, your payment every single month is never going to change. It's never going to go up regardless of what happens to inflation. So let's just say your monthly payment is $1,000 a month, and this is your mortgage payment. So if inflation goes up and up and up, excuse me, at a rate higher than your interest rate, there's a transfer of purchasing power from the bank to you. So if inflation is running at 10% and your mortgage is at 3%, assuming that your income stream from the property is increasing at the rate of inflation, so 10%, that would be a transfer of purchasing power from the bank to you of 7%. The difference between the 10% increase in your cash flow just because of inflation and the interest rate you're paying on the mortgage. So let's just take this to an extreme so you can really understand what we're talking about, or what I'm talking about. Let's just say we go into Venezuela hyperinflation, and let's just say that it happens over a month. Now, I know that's not going to happen. It's but just for a thought experiment to understand, let's just say that it does. So let's say your mortgage is $500,000. Okay, let's say in a month, though, we have so much inflation in the United States, $500,000 will now only buy a loaf of bread. Well, your income stream from your property is going to be way, 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 way higher than $500,000 because you're going to be charging more than the value of a loaf of bread, right? So let's just say that your rent now is $1 million a month. Okay, well, you can take 500,000 of that and pay off your mortgage in just one rent payment. In other words, you can pay off your entire mortgage for the cost of a loaf of bread. That's what I mean by shorting the dollar. You're basically, you have a position where you profit, your purchasing power increases as a result of the value, the purchasing power of the dollar going down. That's being short the dollar. So that, hopefully that explains it well. All right, Sebastian, let's get to the next question, buddy. Revival 305, thank you for the super chat. If gold preserves wealth, why is nominal price same as 2011? Would you convert cash into gold now and then sell to buy real estate in a few years? I think you really have to focus on time horizon, Revival. So again, let's take this to another extreme. Let's say that you purchased gold tomorrow morning at 9:30, right when the market opened. And I know that the gold market, I think you can get futures, but let's just say the gold market opens tomorrow morning at 9:30. So you go out and you buy yourself $100,000 worth of gold at 9:30. Let's say at 10 a.m., the price has gone down by 1%. Did you make a bad investment? Most people would say no. Well, let's say that you've owned it for a year and the price has gone down by 1%. Did you make a bad investment? Some people would say no. Some people would say yes. And so let's say you have it for 10 years and the price goes down by 1% in nominal terms. Did you make a bad investment? It all depends. It depends on the price of everything else, right? So it's time frame and compared to what is really what I'm trying to get at. So let's just say 10 years and it goes down by 1%. Well, if the price of the S&P during that time went down by 50%, it's a pretty good investment. If the price of real estate went down by 50%, it's a good investment. So, and you got to remember that gold really is, yeah, exactly. It's just to preserve wealth. So let's see. I'm trying to think of what the DXI was. or the DXY was back in 2011. I can't really remember. Another thing you have to remember, Revival, is gold in every currency other than the dollar is at all-time highs nominally. So I know you're probably a U.S. American investor, so your expenses are in dollars. So that's really all you care about. But I think really what I'm trying to say regarding your question specifically is over time, gold will retain its purchasing power. It might fluctuate over a week or a year, or maybe even 5 years, something like that. It might go up or down. And by the way, you might be looking at the nominal price in 2011 when it was in a bubble. So there at that point in time, it exceeded the purchasing power, right? So as an example, if the measurement is an ounce of gold buying a suit, and in 2003 you could buy a suit, in 2011 you could buy 2 suits with gold, and now you can still buy 1 suit with gold, it doesn't mean that you've lost wealth. It just means that in 2011 gold went up higher than the rate of just preserving wealth, right? You've got to look at really what gold would buy you back in the 1900, and then what it would buy you in 1950, then what it would buy you in 1990, and then say, okay, what does it buy me today as far as a basket of goods and services? You can't really take it from its all-time high like in 1980 or something, and then in 2011 and say, well, it's lower price now, that means I haven't preserved my wealth. I think you're looking at it the wrong way. And this is a great example of a mistake people make all the time, is you're looking at it in terms of preserving wealth based on its price, not on what it can buy you in terms of goods and services, right? Just look at what historically gold has been able to buy you. I'm saying go back to 1900. You can go back to the 1600s. You can go back even further than that, and gold has pretty much bought you the exact same thing. So there's going to be times when it might buy you a little less. There's going to be times when it buys you a lot more, but you can't compare it to those times. You got to compare it to the middle. I think that's the easiest way I can say it. All right, next question. George, thank you for the super chat. What is your view on the UK with Brexit, global depression? The British pound doesn't look strong. The BOE going full steam ahead on MMT. Should I leave? I don't know your personal situation, George. I don't know what your priorities are. If you have the same priorities I have, I would not want to be in the UK, especially if I was a UK citizen. I mean, you've got it great because you're not taxed on your citizenship. You're taxed on your residency. So why on earth? Americans, we're screwed unless we go to Puerto Rico, because we're taxed on our citizenship. So even if we go to the Cayman Islands or someplace that doesn't have, I think they don't have tax, but even if we go to a place that has a lower tax, we're still paying the crazy the US taxes, where you don't have that. So you've got a great opportunity. But I would not want to be in the middle of Brexit, and not saying I'm for or against it. Why? Well, what's your upside? The weather's terrible. It's expensive. I don't get it. I just don't get it. I would so much rather be in someplace going long volatility where I didn't have to pay much tax. Like, as an American, for me, that's Puerto Rico, and then I've got access to the whole entire Caribbean there. But for you, my goodness, you could go several different places around the world. So I don't know your priorities. I don't know your situation. I hate to give you specific personal advice, George. All I can say is that if you have the same priorities I have, and that is maximum freedom, mobility, low taxes, to coin a phrase from Andrew Henderson, who's got a fantastic website, The Nomad Capitalist, he always says you've got to go where you're treated best. And I totally agree. I totally agree. And I don't think you're being treated the best, let's say, in the UK. And I don't think you're being treated the best right now in the United States. There's just too many risks when you look at social unrest. I just saw a video that the whole riots over George Floyd that we have in the United States, they're now in the UK and they're everywhere. They're all around. So I just don't want to be in the crosshairs. Life's too short. Why do it when you could be on a beach kite surfing, or you could be in the mountains somewhere gorgeous, just enjoying life, and just occasionally you tune in to see how the world is collapsing around you. And if it doesn't, that's even better. But why put yourself in the middle? Like, what's your upside and what's your downside? Remember, in investing, we're looking for maximum asymmetry, meaning you've got the most upside and the least amount of downside. Right now, if you're physically in the United States or the UK or someplace like that, I think you've got asymmetry, but in the wrong way. I think you've got very little upside and you've got a whole ton of downside. So I think that's the best advice I can give you. Okay, Sebastian, next question, please. Atlas, thank you for the super chat. At what net worth would you consider CBI? Or should I? CBI? I'm sure I should know that acronym, but it's not coming to mind. At what net worth would you consider cashing? I'm not sure, guys. Who knows? Tell me in the live chat, guys. What is CBI referring to? I know as soon as I see it, I'm gonna be like, "Oh, George, you idiot." What is Atlas referring to with CBI? I'm waiting for it to pop up in the chat here. Oh, citizen-based investment. Okay, I wouldn't have known that. Okay. At what net worth would you consider a citizen-based investment? Oh, I see. So you're talking about buying a passport or second citizenship. Or should this be a top priority? I purchased once. I have built. Yeah. I'm assuming you're an American, Atlas. If I had 150 grand, there's no way that I would spend it on a passport. No way. You've got other priorities. You got to grow your wealth. I mean, when I talk about going out and buying a second passport, I'm talking about people who have $1 million, $2, $3, $5, $10, $50 million. I'm not talking about people who have like 50 grand in the bank. I don't know that. Now, I would consider a second passport, but not by purchasing it. I wouldn't just save up all my money and then buy that second passport, and then I've got nothing left. So, as an example, here in Colombia or several places, that if you go there and establish residency, and there's different requirements country to country for how often you have to be there, but you're not charging anything. I mean, you got some fees with paperwork and whatnot, but you can do it in a very at a very low expense, I think, is what I'm trying to say. If you're American, also another kind of bug out thing in the Caribbean would be Puerto Rico or the U.S. Virgin Islands. You don't need a second passport for that. It's going to be harder, but, and another thing for bug out too, well, I won't go into that's going to take me down another rabbit hole. But yeah, I think to answer your question specifically, yeah, if you've only got 150 grand, don't use it to buy a passport. Use it to invest and start building wealth, maybe start a business. And then once you get over 2 or 3 million, then maybe start looking at purchasing a passport. But in the interim, if you have this flexibility, I would consider setting up a bank account outside of the United States. And if you can travel or if you can work from your laptop or something, I would suggest going to another country and starting the process of getting a second passport if it's convenient and if you can. I just wouldn't do the pay to play program, because I think it's just too much of your net worth. Okay, next question. AJ Rodriguez, thank you for the super chat. I'm going to buy some silver. All right, American Eagles, good value with their premiums. Thanks for the time and effort. I appreciate it. I don't know if I'd buy silver coins with a premium. I'm still trying to figure out the tax ramifications. I mean, everyone that says that the coins don't have capital gains tax, just always refer me back to these articles from pawn shops and gold and silver dealers stating that they don't have to report it. So if you go down to your local gold dealer or something and you buy or sell gold, they don't have to report it. I've seen tons of articles saying it's not reportable, it's not reportable, it's not required that you report it. But they're talking about the gold shops themselves. I haven't seen anything saying that the individual themselves doesn't have to report the gain on their 1040. I haven't seen that, or their tax return. So that said, if I'm going to speculate in silver, because to me silver is a speculation, the insurance is for me is physical gold. I'm not really going to do it with coins. I would do it with silver miners. I might do it with physical silver. Not in coins, just in bars. Yeah, I think that's my final answer, AJ. I don't like it when you're paying a premium. And so why pay the premium? I mean, I guess you could say that it's better because if we just go full on Mad Max in the United States, it would be easier to transact with silver coins. And if that's a concern for you, then I would just weigh the benefit of being able to sleep well at night, knowing you've got silver coins that you can use to buy stuff if things go just Mad Max bug out. I would compare that to the downside of having to pay an additional premium. And I think I can't answer that question for you. I think everyone needs to answer that question for themselves based on the probabilities they see of the United States getting to that point. Okay, and then thanks for the time and effort. I appreciate it. Well, thank you. I appreciate you taking the time to be on the super chat and watch the videos, AJ. Okay, next question. East Pro, thank you for the super chat. Get a big business loan now or wait for negative rate? No, don't wait for negative rates. No, no. That's an easy one. The reason I say this is because if you can get a great deal right now, buy it. For heaven's sakes, buy it. Let's go back. Let's look at real estate right now. All of us would agree that real estate's in a bubble. Even Hartman. And that said, is both Hartman and I really like the linear markets. And if you're in a cyclical market right now, I think you should hit the bid immediately meaning sell. But I even think even in a lot of linear markets, things are pricey. They're not cheap. But if I could somehow find a motivated seller where I could buy a property at 2000 in a nice linear market at 2012 prices, hey, no brainer. I don't care. I'm not waiting for negative interest rates. No way. No way. If I can get something cheap, or if I can get a 1% RV ratio in a good neighborhood, in a linear market that's hopefully outside of the chaos of the riots and looting, and somewhere in a neighborhood where most people are owner occupants. And if I'm getting a smoking deal, and if I'm getting cheap cash flow, if I'm getting cheap debt, if I'm getting the house itself or the real estate, the property itself cheap compared to 2012 adjusted for inflation, I'm pulling the trigger. I'm not waiting for negative interest rates. So same thing for a business. If you've got a smoking business lined up that you're about ready to purchase, and it's throwing off a 20% return. I used the example on Twitter the other day of buying a Circle K for 500 grand. And you want to talk about long volatility. Hey, what about Circle K? I mean, what are people going to buy in volatile times with these riots and everything that we see going on today? They're going to buy booze. They're going to buy alcohol. They're going to buy cigarettes. They're going to buy weed, most likely. So, maybe a Circle K, maybe that's a good long play on volatility. Excuse me. Anyway, I'm getting off on a tangent there. My point is, I use the example of buying a Circle K for 500 grand. That's throwing off 100 grand in cash. And if you can do that, I mean, pull the trigger, if that's your skill set. If you don't know anything about business, don't do that. Don't do that at all. But I'm assuming you know quite a bit about business if you're considering a business loan or whatever the numbers that make a lot of sense. Maybe I'm just using 500 and 100 as an example. Maybe it's 400 and 100 that you're at a 25% return. Boy, if you leverage that 500 like an SBA loan, you had 100 grand coming in and it was completely hands off to where you had good management. Geez, that could be a good play. So my point is, don't get fixated on waiting for negative interest rates. Focus on the deal in front of you. And if the deal makes a lot of sense and it's cheap and you're going to make money on the buy side, go ahead and pull the trigger. Okay, next question. Chris, thank you for the super chat. Do you agree with Peter's shift? Get out of U.S. stocks and into foreign stocks instead. With impending U.S. dollar collapse in world reserve, U.S. stocks have further to fall than their counterparts. I do to a certain extent. I think I would prefer a more nuanced approach. If we're just talking about buying the S&P 500 compared to stocks of another country that might be cheaper right now because of cerveza sickness, such as Singapore, and I haven't looked at their stock market, so I don't know if it's cheap, expensive. I'm just giving you an example. Then, yeah, I would prefer that. But I think that there's some stocks, if they get really cheap in the U.S., that would be interesting. Just like back in March, the gold miners were very interesting. Those are denominated in dollars. Schiff is all about them. So it depends on what U.S. stocks you're talking about. And I think a lot of it, Chris, has to do with what currency are you paying your expenses with? And this is something that most people don't ever think about. I've never really heard anybody talking about it other than myself, because I have firsthand experience with it. So it's something I'm always considering. If your bills are denominated in dollars, You don't want to take 100% of your portfolio and go into assets that are denominated in another currency, just in case it goes against you. Because if it goes against you, then you're getting crushed. So that said, I totally agree with Schiff in the sense that I think you should have some diversification with your political risk and your currency risk. So if your expenses are denominated in dollars, let's say, and you have 50% of your portfolio denominated in dollars, and then you have another 50% of your portfolio in these assets that Schiff is talking about, well, I think that could be interesting, and I definitely look into that. But I just wouldn't do it with 100%, or I wouldn't do it with anything over 50% if my expenses were denominated in dollars. And that goes for anyone. Just you can replace dollar with XYZ currency. If you're someone in the UK and your expenses are denominated in pounds, if you're someone in Colombia and your expenses are denominated in pesos, it doesn't matter. Just you've got to be mindful of, because I know a lot of guys here, and as an example, that don't have, they have peso assets, but they have dollar expenses. And so if the peso goes from 3,000 to 4,000, they're getting hammered. They can't afford to pay their bills. So you don't want to put yourself in that position. And none of us are smart enough to know with 100% certainty what's going to happen to the dollar over the next 5 years, 10 years. We can assume, and obviously the longer the time goes, I think the higher the probability that the dollar loses value to a lot of other currencies. But at the end of the day, they're all fiat anyway. So it's going to lose value compared to gold over the next 10 years, most likely. But nothing's certain. So, and none of us are smart enough. Another thing we have to understand, I'm going to go into this in tomorrow's video, is you've got to be honest with yourself what your skill sets are. Right? We're not professional investors. I'm not even close. But what I'm really good at doing, because of all my years as an entrepreneur and having success and failure and knowing what leads to success and what leads to failure, is you've got to be honest with yourself about what your strengths are and what your weaknesses are. And you've got to eliminate ego. Ego, like Jim Rogers, to use his phrase, it's a fast way to the poorhouse. And that's in business and investing. So you got to get ego, and you've got to just be honest. And I think if most of us are honest with ourselves and we look in the mirror and say, I'm not a professional investor. I'm not a pro. I'll never be a pro, ever. So knowing that I'm not a professional and I'm only an amateur, I'm never going to be a Stan Druckenmiller. I'm never going to be a Chris Cole, a Warren Buffett, or even a Peter Schiff for that matter. I'm never going to be that good. I'm never going to have that much control. Even if I understand as much as they do, I'm still never going to have the money management skills. I'm never going to have the skill set to construct a portfolio in a way that's mathematically most conducive to long-term gains. I'm never going to know when to buy, when to sell, as well as they do. I'm just never going to be in that league. Combine that with the fact that I'm never going to have as much control over my emotions as these pros do. So once you have that humility, you can come at it with a much different approach and say, listen, I'm not trying to get rich here. I'm not trying to make 100% gains year over year over year. I'm just trying to do what's smart. And I'm just trying to do what is within my skill set. And if something's outside of my skill set, then I'm going to subcontract that out to people who are really, really good at that, like Chris McIntosh and Lynn Alden. I get a quick plug for Rebel Capitalist Pro right there. But you get my point. We're not pros, so we need to build a portfolio with that understanding. And it's not to say that just because we aren't professionals, it doesn't mean that we can't do extremely well. But I think we just need to have a different mindset, and we need to start with that humility. Now I'm going back to your question because I'm not sure why I went off on that tangent. Benio's class. Oh, right. And that you shouldn't put 100% of your eggs in any basket. That you should have some diversification within the assets in your portfolio, and you should have the political jurisdiction diversification, and you should have currency diversification. Let me make sure U.S. Okay, yeah, I think I got it. All right, next question. Jay Kerr, thank you for the super chats. Thoughts on annuities? I have a TIAA account, 250 grand, 2.5% interest, and think of going all in 6. I don't like annuities, Jay. I have never had an annuity. And I want to clarify, I'm not even a novice. I don't really know much about them at all. But I'm assuming it's basically you're paying them X and they're paying you Y per month for the next 20 years. I don't like that, because you got to have a lot of confidence that we're not going to see some super high inflation in the United States. Because my guess is that annuity is not tied to the rate of inflation. And if it is tied to the rate of inflation, it's going to be tied to some bogus number like the CPI, which we know understates inflation dramatically. So you'd have to look at your personal inflation rate for what you'd be using to purchase with the cash flow that was coming in from that annuity. And I can promise you, well, I can't promise you, but I'd be willing to bet what you buy, your groceries, your car payment, your healthcare costs, your kids' education costs is going up at a rate higher than the CPI. So I don't. This is going along the dollar, and I mean, a year, 2 years, okay, I get it. We might have some price deflation, but over the long term, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, which I think is what annuities are all about, I wouldn't want to be on that. No way. And don't go all in with anything. That's exactly what my last rant was all about. Don't go all in. I don't care what it is. Gold, Bitcoin, I don't care. It's just none of us are perfect, and there are no certainties. There are only probabilities. That's it. Don't go all in. I think if you guys remember the conversation I had with Jim Rogers, who's my favorite investor of all time, I asked him about diversification, and he doesn't like it. He says, no, if you want to get rich, don't diversify. But you got to remember, that's coming from Jim Rogers. Like, none of us are ever going to be as good as Jim Rogers. We're just not. So, okay, that's Jim Rogers can get away with that, but George Gammon can't get away with that. You see? And also remember what he's saying. In order to get rich, right? I don't think it's for amateurs like me. I don't know that it's a good mindset to tackle investing from a standpoint of I've got to get rich. I want to get rich. Ironically, I think for us mere mortals, if we try to tackle investing from a standpoint of staying rich in the long run, I think we're actually going to have better returns. And we might get rich, but I don't think we're going to get rich trying to get rich. I think we're going to get rich trying to stay rich. Hopefully that makes sense. All right, next question, please. Not sure. I'm trying to figure out the username. Hemp3King, maybe? I think. All right. Thank you for the super chat, regardless of the interesting username. Bought physical gold, 1520 last year. Okay. 45% of total portfolio. Oh, wow. All right. Want to sell to buy real estate in PL? In PL. Let's see. In versus USD linear market. How to find PL properties. PL positive. PL properties with gold as I'm a US citizen. Okay, let me try to figure this out here. Want to sell to buy real estate. Okay, I got that. In PL. Zloty versus US. Guys, do we know what this gentleman or this lady is referring to as far as PL? I need help on this one. Oh, in Poland? Oh, and you're talking about the currency. The zloty. Okay, got it. Thank you very much. Okay, 1982 helped me with that one. Thank you. And Hemp3King. Okay, now I see it. Poland. Yeah. Okay. All right. Got it. Want to sell to buy real estate in Poland. Okay. How to find Polish properties. How to finance Polish properties with gold as I'm a U.S. citizen. Boy, I'm not sure about this. I don't have any clue. I've only been to Poland a few times, and it wasn't to look at real estate. So I'm not sure if you could get a mortgage there as a U.S. citizen. I'm assuming you found a market in Poland that's a nice linear market, and it's good cash flow, and you're bearish the dollar versus the or you're basically bullish the Polish currency against the dollar. To execute this, so first of all, I wouldn't sell all your gold, but I would hang on to 10% of your portfolio, of course. How would I do that? I mean, I don't think there is a fancy way to do it other than just you sell your gold, you've got your dollars, you'd have to, I'm assuming you've got a bank account in Poland, you'd have to wire the money to the bank account, then you buy the property outright. I don't know if you're going to be able to get too much leverage as an American citizen. You might. I know that foreigners can get leverage in the United States, but my guess is you'd have to buy it with cash. And if you can get a better than 1% RV ratio in a linear market outside the United States, I'm all about it. Especially if you're diversifying your portfolio, going back to the currency diversification, which it sounds like you're doing. I wouldn't, and again, it depends if your expenses are in dollars, which I'm assuming they are. So I wouldn't do it with a huge chunk of your portfolio, but I definitely think it's interesting, for sure. But I think your main question is how to finance the Polish properties with gold. I don't know, other than just selling the gold and wiring the dollars over there to buy it, if I'm understanding your question correctly. Let me make sure someone isn't informing me that I'm missing something here. Yeah, I think that's the best I can answer the question. Yeah. Okay. Next question, please. AG, thank you for the super chat. Hi, George. I have the opportunity to move to Puerto Rico rent-free. Wow. Awesome. No kids, no debt. How much money do you recommend I have or my net worth should be in order for me to move to be worth it? I don't know that it's as much about your net worth, AJ, as it is about your income and your cash flow from your business. So I mean, if you're in the United States and you're an employee and you're making 50 grand a year, you're not going to have much of a benefit by going to Puerto Rico at all. Other than living rent free, I mean, that's always a benefit. You could just take that money and invest it and use it to build a portfolio. So if you have the opportunity specifically in portfolio to live rent free, then I would do it for sure. Just for that reason alone. But as far as Act 20 and 22, or Act 60 is what they call it now, I don't know that you'd have a huge benefit. How much money do you recommend I have? I mean, Puerto Rico is cheap, but it's not wildly cheap like Colombia. You're still on the dollar there. I would go on Numio, I think is the website. Just type in cost of living Puerto Rico, and you're going to get a website called or something close to Numio. And that's where I always look at comparisons. So you can see, okay, Puerto Rico would be similar to something I know here in the United States as far as cost of living. And then you can do the math on your own. Keep in mind, there's dramatic differences based on where you live. If you live in Condado, in the real nice part of San Juan, or like Dorado, the Ritz-Carlton, where Schiff lives, your cost of living is going to be extremely high. But if you live on like the western side of the island or the far eastern side, your cost of living is going to be pretty darn low. It all fluctuates quite a bit. So I don't know that there's a specific dollar amount of net worth that I would have. It all depends on, now let's go back and assume that you've got a business. And if you've got a business that's throwing off $200,000, $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 a year in profit, then yeah, it's going to be worth your time. Definitely. So it really depends there. Or if you had like a massive portfolio of, I'd say $2, $3, $4 million plus, then it would be beneficial because the capital gains, because now you have to actually buy a property. So you're going to drop 400 or 500 on a property. So it's really hard for me to, how much money do you recommend I have? Okay, so I guess to answer your question specifically, if I had a business that was making more than probably 200. If I had a business making more than 200, I think I'd pull the trigger. I think it'd be worth it. As far as living rent free, I think it's regardless of your business or how much income you have. I think if that's the only place where you can live rent free, I'd do it, because housing is most Americans' number one cost. And if you can get rid of that cost, take the money, put it towards investing over the next 20, 30 years, you're going to be way, way, way ahead of the game. So, okay, next question. Corey Johnson, thank you for the super chat. What's up, G? Is there a minimum annual yield you personally like to see a stock payout and a dividend before you consider buying equity, assuming it's cheap? Let's see, is there a minimum annual yield? I just kind of compare it to what else I can get. So I know I can get a 10% yield in Medellin, as an example, with a rental property. And I know what my upside is. I know what my downside. You always have to look at your risk as well. It's not just about yield. If you go out and if you can find a 15% yield, but it has massive amounts of risk, that might not be cheap. So I know what I can get, or I know I can get a 10% yield with very little risk in Colombia, as an example. Knowing that, I'm going to look at if I can get a good, solid company with an annual dividend yield of over 10% with very little risk, I'm interested. I'm interested because at the end of the day, the real estate, although it might have low risk and you might be able to get that 10% return, it is going to require some effort. You're going to have to manage a property manager. That'll take you a couple hours a week, maybe less, but it's going to take a little bit of management. That's my point. And if you could just buy a dividend paying stock, put it in your portfolio, clip the coupon for the next 20 years, that's going to be easier than real estate. So that's kind of how I look at it. I look at it as how much less effort is a dividend paying stock over time. Up front, I think there should be just as much effort with the dividend paying stock because you got to do your homework. This is not easy. You've got to have the right tools. You've got to have the right approach. You've got to have the right game plan. And I think stocks are just like real estate from the standpoint is you're going to make money on the buy side, not so much the sell side. You might, but you're going to make your money on the buy side. So that's where all the homework really comes into play. So I think that's the best way I can answer the question. If I can get something at a 8, 9, 10, 12% dividend that's a solid company that I see very little downside risk, even if the dividend is canceled for 6 months or a year, I'm interested. Not saying I'm going to buy it, but I'm interested. Yeah. So quick takeaway is 10% is probably the magic number. Okay, next question. Light-minded, thank you for the super chat. What are the chances of the 30-year treasury going to or below 0% within the next 3 months? The 30-year? Very low, light-minded. The probability of that is see, the 30-year going negative in 3 months. I'd say under 5%. What you've got to understand, it's not just about the United States. You've got to understand it's about worldwide deployment of capital. If you're in Japan, if you're in the Eurozone, you've got negative rates. You've got a release valve to a certain extent in U.S. Treasuries. So you're gonna go into Treasuries because you can't go all in because again you've got currency risk there. But you're going to be in U.S. Treasuries to a certain extent. So if the yield on the 30-year goes down to what it is in Japan or the Eurozone, what is the motivation for those sovereign wealth funds or huge hedge funds or whatever they are, these giant pools of capital, what is their motivation to continue holding those treasuries? Not much, because now they've got currency risk and they're not getting paid for it. And the Fed really, I don't think they want the 30-year under in negative territory, because you're going to invert the yield curve most likely. And if the yield curve wasn't inverted, the short end would be so negative that you'd have a customer deposit issue there. You're running into a lot of bad problems and some serious unintended consequences. So could that happen over 3 years? Much more likely. But in 3 months, I would say under 5%. Okay, next question. And Sebastian, if you can do me a favor and just text me how many more questions we have, I would greatly appreciate it. Just send me a WhatsApp. Okay. Kane, thank you for the super chat. Hey, George, here's some money for teaching me so much important info. Thank you very much, Kane. I appreciate it. I'm really glad that you guys are getting value from the videos, and I can't tell you how much it means to me and everyone on the team for you guys to take time out of your schedule to actually watch the videos and be on a live stream and to comment. And I understand your time is precious. We have very little of it here on this planet. And for you guys to willingly take time out of your precious time and allocate it to watching one of my videos really means a lot. And still to this day, it's quite surreal, to be honest with you. But we appreciate it just as much, if not more, than you guys do. I heard of you from Schiff. Okay, great. Loving my whiteboard lessons. Thank you. Well, and thanks to Peter Schiff for the shout out. I've got to actually get him back on the channel here really soon. That was a fantastic interview. And hopefully I'll be able to interview him once every 2 months or so and get his opinion on what's going on in the markets, because he's just an incredibly sharp dude, and obviously someone that we should all listen to and try to digest his insights to make ourselves better investors for sure. Okay, next question, Sebastian. Andrew, thank you for the super chat. Follow up, Robert Barnes episode. Yeah, that was a good one, wasn't it? Robert's fantastic. Robert's a really nice guy too, but boy, when you dive into the knowledge and experience he actually has, not just being a lawyer, but all this stuff with bugging out and getting passports, and I don't know if you recall what he was saying about Cuba, and really just fascinating stuff. I really enjoy talking to Robert. What country would you consider closest to U.S. economic, personal freedom wise, First, Second Amendments, private property, etc.? Okay, so gun laws, I'm not. I haven't done much homework there, Andrew. But a quick Google search will tell you which countries have gun laws. I don't think any of them are going to be as lax as the United States. As far as your personal property, I mean, that's easy. There's almost every country I've been to has just as good a property rights as the U.S. Well, I shouldn't say every country I've been. The countries I spend a lot of time in. Especially when it comes to real estate, you got to keep in mind that the Americans like to think they've got a lot of property rights in the United States, you might want to reconsider that. Just for those of you who think you own your home just because it's paid for outright, guess again. The government owns your home, or at least the government has a lien on your house. Just try not paying your property taxes for a year or two and see what happens. The government always has a lien on your house, and that's not consistent with every country I've been to. So as far as private property rights in real estate, I've seen a lot of countries that have better private property rights than the United States. As far as your First Amendment right, your freedom of speech, does the United States really have freedom of speech? Honestly, this is something that I think about and I've thought about a lot in the past. Is yes, it's a law on the books that you have freedom of speech, but just what are the social ramifications if you say something wrong? You're going to lose your job. You could potentially lose everything. Your wife divorces you. You're a social outcast. You have the right to say it, but from a standpoint of the downside to saying it, I don't know that there's a country, maybe Australia, maybe the UK, that's as bad as the United States for having a lack of freedom of speech from a standpoint of the actual impact it has on you in the real world, not just the law in the books. So let's use Colombia as an example. Like on the books, the United States, it would appear they have more freedom of speech. But trust me, in Colombia, if you say there are only two genders, you're not going to lose your job for that. You're not, in fact, people aren't even going to, they wouldn't even, they'd be like, duh. Like, why are you even saying that, stupid? So you see what I'm saying? That in practice, there's a lot of countries that I would argue have a much higher degree of freedom of speech than the United States. So the gun laws, you just have to check that out. As far as private property, tons of countries have the same private property rights, if not better, when you look at real estate specifically, than the United States. I think really what it boils down to, Andrew, what you'll find when you go to other countries, it isn't necessarily the things you're fixated on, although that's very, very important. I would also consider things like the weather, the cost of living, the food, the culture, the people. Make sure that that is just as high a priority as your freedom of speech, because your freedom of speech, that comes into play maybe once a year, once every 6 months, maybe. But if you hate the people, that comes into play every minute of every day. If you hate the weather, or if you love the weather, that impacts every minute you're there. Same thing for the food, the culture. So I'm not saying those things aren't important, but I'm saying make sure that you're prioritizing the parts of life that you experience daily instead of the parts of life that you might experience annually. Okay, next question. T-Con, thank you for the super chat. Real estate, HX, price per inflation. Okay, with massive QE, inflation more than ever. Is it not possible the real estate bubble eventually surpassed by inflation and real estate go parabolic without ever correcting? Oh yes, yeah. I'm sorry, guys. I didn't read that out loud because the question's a little encrypted here. we got a few of those today. But basically, what T-Con is saying is, can nominal prices of real estate continue to go up forever, even though in real terms prices go down? And the answer is yes, 100%. 100%. And in fact, whenever I say that U.S. is in a bubble or prices are going down, hopefully I'm saying in real terms. Hopefully I'm saying that right afterwards. And if I don't, it's just a mistake on my part. 100% we could see. I mean, look at Venezuela. Prices never went down in terms of their local currency, Bolivar. Now, and in fact, when they first started their hyperinflation bout recently, the prices, even in dollars, went up in dollar terms. More recently, I think prices have gone down because of social unrest and it's just completely collapsing. But in bolivars, prices today are way higher than they were 5 years ago because you've got hyperinflation. But it doesn't necessarily mean that you have the same amount of purchasing power with that piece of real estate that you did 10 years ago. It's all about purchasing power. So yes, with massive QE, or if we have massive inflation in the United States, it is absolutely possible. Is it not possible? For the real estate bubble. But is it in a bubble? So if, let's say, prices double in nominal terms, but inflation adjusted, they go down by 50%. Are we still in a bubble? No, not when you look at a historic price chart going back to 1900 adjusted for inflation, because you see that where we were, in 1998 and where we were in 2012, adjusted for inflation, was about the norm, about the mean, going all the way back to the year 1900. So for 100 years in the United States, the prices didn't really go up or down when you adjust for inflation and the size of the property, the size of the home. So again, if prices quadruple, if they go up 10 times, if that $100,000 house is now worth, let's say the price is now $1 million, but the $1 million can only buy you what $50,000 could have bought you when you bought the house. The real price has been cut in half. Therefore, it could be cheap and not in a bubble. So hopefully you understand what I'm saying. To answer your question quickly is yes, but please be cognizant of nominal versus inflation adjusted prices. Okay, next question. The 12 more questions. Wow. Okay. All right. Let me let me get to it here. The Unspoken Scott, thank you very much for the super chat. Will the coming collapse? I think you're asking, will the coming collapse the welfare state? I don't think so. No, I think the welfare state will continue to increase, especially if we have a collapse. And again, a collapse of what? A collapse of society, a collapse of the dollar, a collapse of asset prices, an economic collapse, another financial crisis. It's a tough question to answer because there's a lot of nuance. But the short takeaway is I see the welfare state in the United States increasing dramatically over the next 5 years. I do not see it decreasing. I would say there's, in my opinion, a 90% chance that the welfare state increases over the next 5 years in the United States. Okay, next question. Turn off my AC there. Rosh, thank you for the super chat. George, do you think Brent Johnson's dollar milkshake theory accounts for the Fed possibly buying foreign currency to relieve the shortage of dollars? Brent's a super, super smart guy. So I don't think there's anything that Brent hasn't thought through. I think his argument would probably be there wouldn't be a lot of political will to do that. But I think Brent also has said many times he thinks the end game could be a Plaza Accord 2.0, in which case this would probably happen. So do you think? So I think Brent's dollar milkshake theory could include exactly what you're saying. He just thinks that it will happen after the DXY has gone to, let's say, 120, compared to it happening right now, or compared to it happening prior to the dollar going above 100 again, something like that. So do you think Brent Johnson's dollar milkshake theory accounts for the Fed? So short answer, yes. And I think that Brent actually thinks this will happen, but again, it's all a matter of timing. He thinks it'll happen after the DXY goes to 120. Or it might be 140. And FYI, guys, I'm interviewing Brent not next week, but the week after. So I'll get his update on the dollar milkshake theory and everything. So not this coming week, but the week after. Watch for Brent's interview. Okay, next question. Ron, thank you for the super chat. 58% in CDs. I don't like CDs, buddy. Eesh. Okay. 2% Bitcoin, 5% metal, 35% income rental properties. Use interest on CDs to live. What should I do as CDs mature? 8-week T-bills. Yeah. I don't like CDs because what are they doing to give you that higher rate? And I'm not saying they're definitely going into the repo market. I know mutual funds, or excuse me, money market funds, that's how they get their carry, is through the repo market. So I would assume, Ron, you don't want anything to do with that. As far as CDs, I think that could be different. I don't want to scare you too much, but I would suggest whomever you have that CD really looking through the fine print and saying, okay, what assets are they investing in? Like what are they using to buy with my money? And I would be very, I would want to be on top of that for sure. Then, assuming that they're just doing prudent things with it, sure, just go ahead and let it expire, roll it into 8-week T-bills. Definitely. I think that's a smart thing to do. I think you might be, I might take some of that, and instead of going into 8-week T-bills, I might go a little more into the speculative side, Ron. And I rarely say that to people because generally they're overweight speculative stuff. But I think you might be underweight a little bit here because you only got 2% in Bitcoin, 5% in metal, which I'm assuming is your insurance. So I would buy more insurance to where you're at 10%. And I'd buy some more speculation. Not saying I'd buy Bitcoin, but I might look at the silver miners, the gold miners. I might look at uranium. I'm trying to think right off the top of my head what else. That's kind of where I'd look at maybe increasing the 2% in Bitcoin, or just a 2% in speculation that you have in your portfolio, maybe up to 10%, and getting 10% in insurance. I love the 35% income on rentals. That's fantastic. But assuming you want to keep some powder dry there, that's probably what I'd do. I'd allocate a little more to the speculative side. I'd allocate a little more to the insurance side, and then I would go into 8-week T-bills. Yeah. Congratulations, by the way. Got to really good looking portfolio. Okay, next question. Buck, thank you for the super chat. Which will have a bigger impact on the US GDP, supply chain or demand issues? This is a tough question. In fact, I went over this with Chris and Lynn the other day. What will be the impact of government stimulus on both? Your question, Buck, is getting at inflation, at CPI, or consumer price inflation. Let me be specific. Here's what I think is I've been thinking about it this weekend, and I think this is now my base case. I think the Fed put may have expired, meaning the Fed going in and just buying treasuries and mortgage-backed securities from the primary dealer banks by creating trillions of bank reserves that are just held at the Fed, and then hoping the primary dealer banks or the commercial banks take some sort of action that would increase risk assets. That's kind of been the QE playbook. But I think the Fed put may have expired back in March, because if you remember, when the Fed was coming out every single day and saying they're going to do unlimited QE, they drop interest rates by 100 basis points. They're committing to $1 trillion a day in the repo market. They're just throwing everything at it but the kitchen sink. But what did the market do? The market didn't go up. The market went down. The market tanked every single time, not every time, but the majority of the time when the Fed came out and announced some QE infinity, let's say, the market would go up for like a half hour or a couple hours and then boom, tank. That tells me that the Fed put could have expired. Not saying it definitely did, but it may have. So what brought the market back up? Well, if you look at what happened in March, once the government came out with their stimulus package, that's what brought the market, or that was kind of the turning point for the market to start going back up. So my hypothesis is the Fed put has expired and it's been replaced with a government stimulus put. But we have to understand that they're drastically different. From the standpoint, the Fed put is the Fed creating bank reserves within the financial economy. It's really held at the Fed. Remember in the one video I did, I called it the Fed bed. They just print these reserves and stick them under their mattress. It doesn't get out in the system. With the government stimulus put, that's completely the opposite. Those aren't bank reserves just held at the Fed. They're creating deposits in the real economy. And those deposits are increasing the purchasing power of people who have the tendency to spend money at a much higher rate of velocity than the entities that are benefiting from the creation of strictly bank reserves held at the Fed. So my point is you go from printing money that doesn't have a lot of velocity, therefore CPI would remain lower, to something that is printing money that not only is a direct increase in the M2 money supply, meaning the money, the currency units in the real economy, but also it's done in a way that will most likely increase velocity. It won't decrease velocity. Two completely separate ways of quote unquote money printing. So if we're now in a regime of a government put, boy, inflation could, and when I mean inflation, specifically, I'm talking about consumer price inflation. Yikes. It could get hot. It could get real hot. So your question is what's going to, is demand going to crash faster than the supply chains, in which case you'd have deflation, or are the supply chains going to crash faster than demand, in which case you would have inflation? And I think that demand, I don't know it's going to crash. I think there's an argument for demand increasing as a result of the cerveza sickness, because people are making more money staying at home with the government massively expanding the welfare state. And think about it, we're in an election year. Trump isn't going to want to take away the goodies just before an election. No way. You think he's going to want to pull back the unemployment and the stimulus checks? And no. I don't think so. I think he's going to want to keep giving out the freebies until the election. And then if he loses, you think that Biden's going to come in there and take away the handouts? There's no way. There's no way. And I would add, I was listening to the most recent podcast, and let me give him a plug here, because you guys have to listen to this today. If you've got any extra time after the live stream gets done, make sure you listen to this. It's this episode. It's yesterday's episode of Preston's and Stig's podcast. We Study Billionaire, the Investors Podcast. And it's the one that came out yesterday with Grant Williams and Luke Gromen. You guys, this is incredible content. But in that, Luke talks about the TGA, the Treasury General account they have with the Fed, being at 1.2 or 3 trillion. That is staggering. I didn't realize that it had gone up so much. The last time I looked at it, it was like 600 billion. And remember you guys might not have seen this videos maybe a month ago or so, but I talked about the Real Vision interview Raoul Paul had with Dr. Barton. I apologize, or no, I'm sorry, Dr. Barton Wang, I think is his name. And he is someone that studies the kind of the plumbing of the Fed extensively. And he was of the opinion the Treasury would allow the account to continue to grow so they'd have some ammunition coming into the election where they could spend it into the economy, literally trillions into the economy right before the election. And they're kind of building up this war chest. And back then, the TGA was only about 400 or 500. Now it's over $1 trillion. I mean, 1.2. I forgot what the number Luke said. I'll have to re-listen to it. But think about that. That's that is inflationary. That's what you do. And so what am I saying? That means the Treasury is just going to spend massive amounts of money directly into the economy, which increases M2, increases deposits, increases velocity, and that means consumer price inflation. So I think my main point I'm trying to make there is I don't know that demand will decrease. I think supply will decrease for sure. I don't know that demand will. So that kind of plays into my longer term outlook for stagflation. Okay, next question. Acrobat Mapping. Thank you for the super chat. This bear rally is not contained in the 61.8% fib retracement, especially the NASDAQ, unlike other bear rally of past 100 years, was contained. Is this a new bull market? Well, I don't get into the Fibonacci numbers too much. I think you've got to, if you saw my video the other day, what I did is try to think through, if this is a new bull market, what does that mean? So if this is a new bull market, all the people, all the 15-year-olds, the grades, the elementary kids, the middle school kids, the high school kids, the millennials, the Uber driver, the shoe shine boy, the construction worker, the housewife, all these unsophisticated investors will get rich by taking their unemployment checks and setting up a day trading account with Robinhood and using nothing, no analytical skills, no facts, no data, nothing other than just their pure raw emotion to make decisions. Those people will get rich. I have a hard time believing that. So just go back through history and show me the time when all those people, when there was a mania in any asset, I don't care, just the stock market, in tulips, in anything, where people went in, where all these unsophisticated retail investors were sucked into the market and doing things we know to be incredibly stupid. And when did that turn out well for the dumb money? When did the dumb money get rich over the long run? I don't know of any point in history when that has happened, ever. Now you can say, oh, George, people made money by investing after 2009, and we've been in a bull market. Yeah, but they didn't go in. Think about when they bought, right? They bought at the opposite time. They bought when everybody hated stocks. At the beginning of a bull market, you don't see people taking out massive amounts of margin and going in and being wildly bullish and buying the dip, buying everything. Everyone you see on Instagram, on Twitter, on Facebook, they're all buying the stock market. They're all setting up day trading accounts. That doesn't happen at the beginning of a bull market. At the beginning of a bull market or the bottom of a bear market, people hate the asset class. They don't want anything to do with it. Every single one of your friends, if you were to tell them, hey, I'm setting up a trading account right now, I'm going in and taking my unemployment check to buy stocks, they would say, what are you doing? Are you stupid? They would have like one of these, when they're sending an alcoholic to AA and they have one of these interventions. That's what all your friends and family members would have if you told them you were buying stocks. They would have an intervention where they'd try to get you to just talk some sense into you, to where, no, you can't do this. You can't buy stocks right now. You're going to lose everything. It's the stupidest thing you've ever done. Don't you know stock prices always go down? Stocks never go up. They always go down. That's when you know you're at the beginning of a bull market. Goes back to 2012. When I first got into real estate. If you remember, if you look at a chart, that was right at the bottom of the real estate bear market. It went down. Real estate went down from 2006 roughly down into 2012. So 6 years it went down, 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 down like that. So for the past, imagine that in 2012, I was going in there and literally taking millions of dollars and buying real estate. And when it had gone down for the last 6 years, everybody was telling me that I was insane. It was the same, like the family members were trying to have an intervention. So George, you've worked your whole life to save all this money. Think of all the effort you've put into starting these businesses and all the gray hair you have, all the stress you went through, all the 80-hour work weeks you've gone through for the last 12 years or whatever to build this much money, and you're just going to go throw it away on real estate? What are you doing? That's madness, George. That's madness. That's what you hear at the beginning of a bull market. Right? What you're hearing now is the complete opposite of that. You go and I'm going to set up a trading account. You announce that on your Instagram. You say, I'm setting up a trading account. I'm going to go buy the airlines. And you automatically get like 1,000 likes on that tweet or that post or whatever. You've got people saying, yeah, great. Hey, I just did it yesterday. Let's kill it, man. Let's kill it. We're all going to crush it. You see what I'm saying? So if we're at the beginning of a bull market, then everything throughout history, going back over thousands of years of asset bubbles and human behavior and psychology would have to be untrue. Personally, I would rather lean on the side of human psychology being the same today as it was 20 years ago, as it was 200 years ago, as it was 2,000 years ago. I don't think we're hardwired, guys. And I don't think that hardwiring has changed over the past 10 years at all. All right, next question. Matt, thank you for the super chat. Great show. I'm just curious about your general view on the state of the Canadian economy. Short, long-term advantages, disadvantages it has. I don't like the Canadian economy much because you guys are really tied to real estate. And it's a lot like Australia. I just had the opportunity to talk to my buddy Martin North down there, and he's a real estate pro in Australia. And I see Canada the same way. And that it's when you've got all this additional consumer spending that's been driven by the ATM of the house just going up and up and up, it's just not sustainable. And then not only that, but the economy outside of real estate gets weaker and weaker and weaker and weaker because you're misallocating resources to an asset bubble. So when the asset bubble deflates, those misallocated resources that should have gone to other places in the economy to build them up are now they've been wasted. So you kind of, from an economic standpoint, you're putting all your eggs in one basket. And you're just putting more and more and more and more eggs in that basket instead of having that diversification that a free market and capitalism would generally give you. So I don't really like it. And Canadian, they're going nuts on the PC stuff. They're just like the States. I don't like the PC stuff. I don't like it at all. I really don't. I think it's a lot more detrimental than people. I think it's a lot more detrimental long term than people would acknowledge. And it's little things. It's just like when I was a kid, I tell this story all the time. The guys I hung around with when I was like 8, 9, 10 years old, if you would have shown up to go on a bike ride with my buddies wearing a helmet, you would have been in a lot more danger, trust me, by showing up wearing a helmet than without one. Why? Because my buddies would have kicked the shit out of you. They would have beat you up. That's why. That you would have gotten your ass beat. I'm not saying helmets aren't a good idea, but what I am saying is through this PC culture that we've had that is just getting more and more insane. It's getting more insane by the week now. It only is going to create a society that is far more fragile than it otherwise would be. And I'm not very bullish on societies that are becoming drastically more fragile. I like anti-fragility. I don't like epic fragility. I don't like having to treat human beings as though they're as though they need to live in a bubble, and we're now praying to the God and the church of people's feelings. And I think that's where we are in the United States. I think you're there in Canada too. Now we've got people's feelings. It's really, I consider it to be like a cult. Like, we've replaced religion with this religion of people's feelings. And now, instead of instead of God being at the top, you've got people's personal feelings. That's what everyone that's what everyone prays to. That's what everyone has the utmost respect for. It's not God. And I was brought up Christian. I'm still Christian, so I believe that's where it should be, in the form of family and God. But now all of a sudden it's in the form of people's personal feelings. I don't think that's I don't think that's a formula for economic success long term. So I think that's how I'd sum up Canada's disadvantages. All right. Next question. Ron, thank you for the super chat. Can you please share your law firm and CPA with Puerto Rico? Yeah, we're right in the middle of the process right now, Ron. And Hartman's asked me for the same thing. We'll see how they work out. When I first went to Puerto Rico, I had a different lawyer, and I emailed him a few times. And I don't know if he's retired. I'm assuming he's retired. So I didn't hear back from him. We're using a different group. We'll see how this group does. I'm not prepared to refer them currently because we're in the middle of the process. We'll see how they do. If they do a great job, which I'm assuming they will, then I'll be more than happy to share their contact information, give them the business, and same thing with the accountant. Okay, next question. Colin, thank you for the super chat. Small order calls exploded again, up from levels before Thursday move. Okay, retail planning. But okay, I know what that means. Again, big money riders will cover and buy up prices again. I don't know, Colin. I'm not a trader, and I don't pretend to be. There's guys who really get into the minutia and the plumbing behind what's going to move the market tomorrow, and I'm just not that good. I'm not that smart. I just stay in my lane, and I know that when I look in the mirror, I know what my strengths and weaknesses are. That's not one of my strengths. My strength is the ability to just over the long term make good decisions and not really worry about the portfolio going up. I take the blackjack approach to it, if you will, and I'll explain that more on next week's videos. But I don't know, Colin. I just don't have an answer for you because that's not really my area of expertise. So I would hesitate to just give you a guess type of answer. Okay, next question. Calvin, thank you for the super chat. Got a good side business on Amazon. Oh, all right, cool. On a website, Asia with full-time job. Okay, survey sickness made business better. Great. When is a good time to quit? Do you have a job? Or did I have a job? Well, I had a job like in college. I've had tons of jobs, but not in the last 20 plus years. I did consulting work, so that might be considered a job. But as far as just being like an employee where I'm like punching the clock, I haven't had one of those in a long, long time, other than a side kind of project thing, which was totally random. So not really a technical job. So when is it a good time to quit? I would quit, Calvin, when I had enough passive income coming in monthly to pay my bills. That's when I would consider. I'm not saying that's the definitive line in the sand, but that's when I'd consider it. So let's say right now your expenses are 10 grand a month. Once you have enough income with dividend stocks and with real estate, you're buying cheap, with 80% of your portfolio. Once you have, and again, when I talk about 80% of your portfolio, I'm not necessarily referring to the entire thing. I'm talking about, I'm not including cash, right? Because everyone's cash position is, and what they feel comfortable with is different. I'm just talking about your investable assets. So when you have 80% of your investable assets or invested assets, throwing off 10,000 a month, that's when I'd consider, okay, maybe now's a good time to hang it up, or now's a good time just to relax for a while and travel for 3 months, 6 months, and just see how it goes. That was my mentality originally, was I want to make sure that I have enough coming in to pay my monthly expenses, so I never ever have to dip into my savings, and I never have to worry about going broke. I never have to worry about spending my money. And it's a great position to be in too, because it allows you to make much better decisions investing moving forward. Like right now, my entire portfolio outside the real estate, I shouldn't say my entire portfolio. I should outside the real estate, but the stocks that I buy, let's just put it that way, they could all go to zero. It doesn't affect me. like I don't want that, obviously. But if all this stuff that I had in the speculative side of my portfolio just went to zero, all right, it's 10%. It sucks, but it's not gonna change my lifestyle at all. Gold, it's not going to zero, because so it's a good position. It allows you to make much better decisions from a standpoint of being able to detach emotion from the equation. And when you don't have to make the money, it seems to flow in a lot easier. Just reading, I want to make sure I answer this thoroughly. Yeah, I think that's the best advice I can give you, Calvin. Okay, next question. Laz from Budapest. Thank you for the super chat. Sister lives in Cleveland with her family. They're looking for new house and selling current one. Okay. Worried about their timing. They might end up buying high and selling low. What would you tell them? It's a little harder when it's their house they want to live in, because there's utility there. Plus, you're in Cleveland. That's a linear market. That's not a cyclical high flyer by any stretch. And if you're worried about their timing, what I would suggest is just renting. Like just rent for 6 months. I mean, you got a lot of uncertainty right now. What's your rush? Like, is your life going to be that much better if you buy right now compared to just renting for the next 6 months or a year? So that's how I'd present it to them. Is just look at your upside and your downside. You really don't have too much of an upside to buying right now, but you sure do have some downside. So just go ahead and rent for 6 months a year. And while you're renting, I would be looking for a good deal and trying to find a motivated seller so I could buy at a 2012 price. And then you don't have to worry about buying high and selling low, because you're buying low. And as long as you buy low, the worst case scenario is you sell low. And that's a hell of a lot better than buying high and selling low. So that's how I would present it to them. Okay, next question. Frederick, thank you for the super chat. I bought a condo under development, 2015 Toronto, for $400K to rent out. It's ready now. Okay. Condo is $600. Would I rent? Monthly cost rent is $23. Oh, hit the bid button. Sell. Frederick, easy question. Sell. You're not even close to a 1% RV ratio. You're in in a cyclical market in the middle of a pandemic. And if you've got someone there to buy at 600, you made a nice tidy profit. Sell, man. Sell. That, yeah. Easy question. All right. Next question. OMA. Thank you for the super chat. How do you recommend to buy gold? Stock, physical? CEF. So normally just the physical. Just find a dealer who you're really comfortable with, that you know, like, and trust, and buy physical from them. Right now, I can't buy physical because we're in lockdown, and you guys know what's going on. So personally, what I'm doing is I'm buying Sprott's product because I know, like, and trust Rick Rule. And also, when I did the homework, I saw the custodian is the Canadian Mint, where with GLD, it's the HSBC. So I'd rather my counterparty risk be with the Canadian Mint. I also think there's some tax advantages that I read, but I didn't really do it for those reasons. That said, when we go back to quote unquote normal, I'll most likely sell my PHYS, the Sprott product, and just parlay that into physical gold. Yeah. All right. Any more questions, Sebastian? That is the last. I'm assuming Sebastian's saying that's the last question with the ticker that says last question. All right, guys. Thanks for being on the live stream. Just as a reminder, next weekend, we're going live with Rebel Capitalist Pro. That's going to be back-end research. It's research from Lynn Alden and Chris McIntosh, live stream Q&As, and an online forum, which I think you guys are going to absolutely love. If you have more questions, make sure you email Gene at the email address is george@georgegammon.com, and he'll email you kind of where to go to get on the list to be notified, or maybe answer some common FAQs on the Rebel Capitalist Pro product. And thanks very much for staying till the end. So I want to do some shout outs here for people who made it all the way to the end of the live stream. We've got Jackie, thank you. We've got Hovem, thank you. Hope I'm pronouncing that right. Dirk, thank you very much. Dirk, good to see you on the super chat from Brussels. Wow. Atlas, thank you for the super chat again, buddy. I love your looks like you got the Atlas Shrug thing there. That's the Rebel Capitals logo as well. Very cool. Jackie, thank you. Murillo, thank you very much. Michael, Taco Negro, E-Money, AI, GG Clips. Is that a reference to me getting a haircut? Ultimate Bargains, Danielle, Caden, Ultimate Bargains, thank you for being here. I see you on every single super chat. That's great. Jamie De La Cruz, good to see you. Tim G, thank you. Vicky, thank you. Brendan, Rickster, 222, Paulius, Annette. Got a lot of people from outside the U.S., it looks like, by the names. Very cool. Oh, Middle Tennessee, Annette, excuse me. Great. Eric Carlson, thank you for being here. Aiden, thanks, buddy. IA Malik. I'm just moving quickly. Sorry. Thank you. Fatal Fasuyo, Super Traveler, Alpinism, Richard Wim, Laz from Budapest. Yeah, Laz from Budapest. Actually, as soon as the cerveza sickness gets done here, I'm going to be trying to shoot over to Southeastern Europe. I enjoy spending time there. I haven't been there in a while. I'd like to go to Georgia as well. I'd like to go to Georgia, Armenia, but then go back to Montenegro and Croatia. All right, Sean, Mother Superior. All right, guys, I got to wrap it up there. I got to get to some lunch. 2 hours again. Okay, thanks for being here, and I will see you on the next video.